So the colors that I'm going to use are primary yellow and Japanese red. I do have other reds, I just happen to like Japanese red. And let's see quickly how this comes over on the screen. I'm going to show you that I've got this sort of palette, a paper palette here. I think you can probably see that. Primary yellow, just trying to get off. Japanese red. So it's a really fiery orange color. Hopefully that will come across in Zoom. We'll see anyway in a moment. So, and I'm using poppy oil. And the best thing to do with anything like this is just slap some color on. And I have a feeling that if anyone is painting along with me, you might find it actually quite interesting to paint with a color other than blue, you know, for a sky, other than blue and white, basically. And just sort of enjoy playing with a bit of color, and it is going to get quite fiery. So it's this sort of sunsetty type thing. There's not a lot of oil in this. It's quite, you see, there's no splashing. It's quite dry. It's more of a stain. Now, depending on how quickly I go through this, I might, if there's time, I might add some of this color to one of the paintings that I did on a lesson a few weeks ago, just to sort of finish something off. But we'll see how that goes. Anyway, so sky first, sort of fiery and interesting. Don't worry too much about where things go at the moment, because everything will shift around, the whole thing will change. And if you think this is wild, I always say this, you know, just go and look at a painting by William Turner, and this will seem quite tame. You notice that I'm not doing all this business. You know, I'm not painting a door. I'm making hopefully, what I call a bit of visual poetry. So how you actually apply the paint is sort of irrelevant, really, as long as you get it on the surface quickly and get the effect that you want. And in fact, if you do what I'm doing, like this, you'll get much more interesting things going on within the color itself. Because what you don't want really is flat color. Flat color is actually very boring. Every now and then you want to put in things that are a little bit unpredictable. Now, if you remember the painting I showed you, the one that I said that might be Hudson Valley style painting, you'll see that more later, but well, maybe I can flash it up on the screen just to give you a little refresher. Let me just see if I can actually do that. I think if I go, there, so I'm going to share the screen. So here's a quick look at that painting, and you can see, I hope, that in the sky, over on the left-hand side at the top, you've got that sort of slightly pinky, purpley color. You've got all kinds of streaks. You've got light yellow, very light white yellow with stronger colors in there as well. And you've got a burst of white down here. And then on the top right, you've got similar colors to the left, but a bit more muted. And it's just sort of interesting. Now, if that was just completely flat yellow, it would be a little bit tedious. So let's just go back to the sky that I painted, just as a reminder on that one as well. That should come up about now. And these are sort of similar colors. It's primary yellow, because that's just a yellow that I like. And the sort of purpley colours on there are red with probably a bit of Payne's grey thrown in. So I've got some Payne's grey here ready, and I'll be using that later on. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to go back to the actual thing. So before I do too much more at the top here, I'm just going to do a little experiment with another brush. This is a brush that's got some dry blue on it, which means it's going to be quite nice and sort of, it's what I would call a crisp brush. It's coming to the end of its life because I sort of forgot it and didn't clean it. But I just want to experiment with a little bit of red ochre on the corner to get this effect of mountains coming up that are catching the light. Let's have a little bit there. This is just an experiment. This may not work, in which case what I'll do is I'll show you what you do to things that don't work. I'm wanting the brush to put in some texture here, you see. So here's some mountain shapes that hopefully will look a bit like what you were looking at, and it's hopefully going to have a bit of a sort of dreamy look to it. It doesn't matter about the edges being furry like that, if you know what I mean. You can defur them quite easily. All I'm after really is sort of structure. And let's see what happened really. I mean, this is the way I recommend that people go about paintings, particularly if you're new to it. You know, get this attitude of let's see how it goes. It might be interesting. There's a few hilly type things here. Let's just make that look a bit more. Okay, this could be somewhere out in, I don't know what part of America it would be. Is it wherever you get these columns of rock? Would that be, I don't know, Colorado? It's whatever they use in the movies. You know, when I was younger, they were always. It's almost like they went and filmed in the same place week after week. But anyway, I used to watch Bonanza on television. Good heavens, that's going back a bit. And here's a quick, very quick sort of skyline. Totally flexible, can be changed in a second, just by deftly swiping it with a piece of paper. That's actually quite interesting. So I'm going to go back and get a bit of yellow with the original brush I was working on and just add a few bits into the mix. Now, I don't know whether you heard that, but I got a very sensitive microphone on. You may not have heard it, but my wife just sneezed somewhere in the house, and I'm sure it picked up. I can see a little graph thing on my camera that shows sounds, and it peaked just as she sneezed. So anyway, I might have to edit that out. Okay, so there's plenty of light hitting the ground, and I think I will just start to figure out how I'm going to bring this to the foreground. I'm using all the tricks that I know on perspective. It's not a big mystery, obviously. If you're doing something like this, the lighter tones are obviously going to go further away, and the darker tones will shoot to the foreground. So by just putting on solid red ochre here, And in fact, if I use the other end of the brush and just chuck in a little bit of Payne's grey, I can bring the foreground even closer. We need a little bit more than that, and a little bit of oil. I've hardly used any oil really. I mean, it's mostly just paint that's been, you know, brutally pushed about that gives you the thin paint look. Now these dark bits here, I'm not quite sure what I'll do with those, but how I will explain them in the picture. By that I mean how I will rationalize putting dark shapes along here. I have to think of something. It could just be that, let's say, well, in the original, there's a very big mountain up here. So this could be in the shadow across here of that mountain, but I don't know yet. We'll just see. So yeah, no, the good thing about if you're a beginner and you adopt this idea of let's see how it goes, it means that if it doesn't go the way you want it to, it's not so much of a disappointment because, of course, you are only looking to see how it goes. If that makes some kind of sense. It's like taking seriousness away because, you know, there's enough seriousness in life without worrying about whether your painting is going to work. And of course, if you fret about what you're painting, chances are it won't work. So now I've got these dark bits, which I'm not trying to make into anything. They're just dark bits. Just a mixture of red ochre and Payne's grey. Let's have a dark shape there. I sort of left that light through there deliberately. You'll see why in a moment. Now, I think I will put a tallish mountain on the right hand side because I think it just looks nice. So it's going to come up here. So before I put that on there, I'm just going to get a little bit of sky colour over there. It could be Mars, actually. So, let's see. That's a bit of an interesting slope there. All the time I'm doing this sort of, how would you describe it? These twitchy movements with the hand here. It's purely to see what textures I can get in there. It's not like if I was sitting down drawing someone's portrait, then the movements that you use would be precise. They have to be precise quite early on in what you're doing. With a landscape, particularly a landscape which is from your imagination, and I'm sort of, you know, I've just been looking at a picture, so I've got a pretty good idea in my mind of what someone has done before and how interesting it looks. I can just push paint around, but I don't have to be precise. As you can see, I can just move paint until it looks like something, and then decide when is a good time to stop. And as you can see, the brush, by turning it, twisting it, and twitching, and generally scuffing it around like this, you can actually make some quite interesting rock type shapes. Always think, if you're doing something like this, obviously, as well, think big. It's a massive thing. So there'll be a lot of textures in that. If you just have one or two changes of tone, it'll look too simple and it won't have that slightly majestic look. You know, to get size in something, you have to have a certain amount of, don't know the word for it really, fussiness. It needs a bit of fussiness in there. And a few things that really, you know, you can put in that don't necessarily need explanation. It's just texture. So what was I going to do down here? Well, what I thought was quite a lot of red light down the bottom through there. And then I might add some water like the original had, but then again I might not. Let's see. Let's just see what happens. Sometimes it can just be interesting without water. I'm not a big water painter. And by that, I don't mean I'm a small water painter, but you know what I mean. I don't think a painting has to have water in it to make it interesting. Now, where the dark and the light meet, I've got a sort of smudgy effect. And it's just there. Now, I'm hoping you can see it. It's just, I don't know, it's just interesting. Sometimes it's quite difficult to explain things that you're doing other than to say that it looks interesting. That's what you're after, really, isn't it? You just want people to look at it, like it, and not be able to take their eyes off it. Okay, so the odd accidental thing going on just in there, and maybe I'll wait till the end if someone reminds me, and I'll do a close-up to show you how little blobs in a painting can look interesting. Maybe there should be some kind of, I mean, sort of foliagey type thing. I'm sure you do get certain amounts of foliage in the desert. If it is a desert, I don't know what it is. It's just somewhere in, you know, halfway in my mind and halfway the picture that you were looking at a few minutes ago. Just have a few shapes in there that could be who knows what. Okay, so let's get some textures through there. Now, what I'm doing here, right, so I uploaded a little video that I made onto my Facebook page. It's also on my Instagram page, and it's a little movie of my painting called The Illusion of Detail. And if you look at it, you'll see that it looks like a highly detailed painting. But it isn't. That's why I called it The Illusion of Detail. It's just impressions of things, fields, hedges, trees, all kinds of stuff. And if you can sort of figure out how to do that effect, you'll find that your paintings will sort of jump way ahead, further advanced than you imagined you could. Don't think I verbalized that awfully well. But once you get to the point where it looks like you're painting detail, but you're not, you will suddenly feel better about what you're doing. And when you feel better, your paintings will improve. So maybe you can see there's some stuff I'm doing there. I'm actually going to zoom in a bit so that you can see it. Right. So they could be trees, who knows? I don't know what they are. But let's say they're trees. It's almost impossible for me to paint a picture that doesn't have some kind of tree in it. So they're almost like silhouetted along the edge of this dark area here. And then, how do I put it? They are just the essence of tree. You don't have to actually paint a tree to make it look like a tree. You can get away with just shapes like this. As long as they have the feeling of treeness. There's something there just for the heck of it. And then this stuff in the foreground, I think I'm going to simplify that using quite a lot of oil and Payne's grey and red ochre. Incidentally, I think I announced, maybe it was at the last lesson, but I had this idea to make a video, a day in the life of me. Now, this doesn't come easy because I really don't like to be in front of the camera too much. But I've been racking my brains trying to figure out how I can make it interesting. And something there. So I'm sort of, gradually building up to doing it. Other than me getting up in the morning and making coffee, being followed around by the cat, I have quite a dull sort of life, really. So I don't know yet, but I'll get there because I'm warming to the idea that it could be a bit of fun. So let's see, where are we now? Right. Okay, so the foreground. Let's just first of all simplify. Now this might turn into grassland. You may notice as I do this, I'm doing it this way with the brush. I could work up and down that way, but actually it's easier this way because I've got the edge of the easel there. I'm going to actually move the camera down a bit so you can see the bottom edge. And you might notice how quickly you can get the feeling of grass. So if I leave some of the white board showing through here, not a vast amount, just a little bit. So that's quite an interesting effect. This is obviously shadow. And I could probably add another color there. In fact, I think I might. Just gonna check on my desk. Okay, so I've got some yellow ochre. Now, yellow ochre is an amazing color because it's actually the color of gold in shadow, if you see what I mean. So gold is a very interesting color because it's sort of yellow, green, brown, and white. If you were painting a picture that included gold, these are the colors you would use. And yellow ochre is actually quite similar to gold in a slight shadow, but it's also, whoops, it's also really good for, I suppose, sort of like prairie grass, something like that. Okay, instant sort of yellowish, I need a drink of water type grass. Quite quick to create that effect too. I can't emphasize strongly enough about how positioning of the brush is important in a painting. For me, it works better if I, first of all, work horizontally back and forth across a picture with either the bristles pointing at the ceiling or pointing at the floor. And plenty of really rough bristles in your brush too. You don't necessarily want a completely flat edge on the top when you buy your brushes. Look for one that's, you know, a bit uneven, and that will that'll produce some nice grassy effects quite quickly. I don't want to go too far with this grass effect, just get the message over. So quite quickly, I think. We're going to have a bigger patch of grass here. Bring out a few highlights in it with a little bit of yellow and white. Just a few twinkly bits. No idea where this place is, but it'd be quite interesting to go there. Okay. We're back on the sky in a minute, just get some interesting shapes up there. So a bit more dark to neutral. Okay. So even more Payne's grey. What I would probably do with a painting like this is get to a certain point and then let it dry, and then put a dark wash over all this stuff here at a later date, obviously. So that's it. A few inexplicable shapes, which hopefully your mind will interpret into whatever fits. And now, I'll move the camera again, and then we'll go back up to the top. So now, with this part, this is where you sort of have fun, I suppose. I could continue to use the brushes that I've got. Let me just see how we get on with that. So I've got Payne's grey, hardly any, just enough, you know, just as I always say, just enough, not a lot. And this is just to sort of see how it goes. Same as everything else. If it doesn't go well, then stop doing it and change to something else. So let's have a little bit of dark cloud up there. The reason I do this, by the way, a lot of artists do this, is as you work through a painting, it's good to have dark, light, dark, light, dark, light in bands. So you've got light, dark, light, big lump of light, dark, light, even lighter, dark, light, working across. It excites the retina. But most of the light is coming from, or will be coming from, sort of just here. This mountain has got darkness on that side, but that's okay. Light in nature does bounce around quite a lot, so you don't have to stick to it religiously. as long as it looks right, doesn't mean to say it has to be right. This is something I learned actually. It was a bit of a surprise when I was a student. They used to, in the first, what they call the foundation year, they basically taught us a bit of everything that we might encounter in our lives as designers. And one of them was hand lettering. And the thing about hand lettering is that it doesn't have to be right. The shapes of letters just have to balance and appear right. They may not be right. For instance, a lot of people don't know it, but if you have a square letter, for instance, the letter N, okay? If you have an N next to an O, the O is bigger than the N, and it has to be because of the round shape at the top and the bottom. So it has to, if you made the top of the O exactly the same as the downstroke in the N, the O would look too small. So in other words, that's a good example of, it doesn't have to be right, it's just got to look right. And it's the same in paintings. If you can get away with making something look okay, then that's fine. Okay, so there's a little bit of structure going into this mountain here that's not particularly thought out. It's done, it's done, as we say in the UK, I don't know whether you say it in America, it's done on the fly. In other words, let's just make a mark, see what happens. And if it looks good, stop. And try and convince people that you knew that you were going to make it look good. Okay, so there's a little bit of structure there. Just using a piece of paper. You can get much more texture from paper than you can from a brush, obviously. And let's just have some light coming across there. Yeah, it's all right. Now then, back to the sky. So yeah, a bit of dark. So this is just Japanese red and Payne's grey. Again, it won't come off the brush when I do that. That's how little oil there is in there. And this is the point where you start to try to get movement in your sky. And it's a very hard thing to explain to people how you do it, but it's almost like conducting the weather. Think of it as, I was called this sort of thing visual poetry, but it's like a mix between painting, poetry, and music. So you conduct how you want things to go, and you won't get movement in a sky unless you do that. You've got to just be brazen and a little bit bold. You may notice also when you're doing this sort of thing, the brush doesn't have to leave the surface, whether you're working on canvas or a board. Obviously, this is a board. Just keep the brush in contact, and never forget that you're not making a sky. You're pushing paint around until it starts to take on an identity. And of course, we know, it's obviously it's going to be a sky because it's up here, it's up the top. And so it will, if you leave it, it'll sort of take on the persona of the sky. I do wonder sometimes when I'm talking as I'm painting, whether I'm coming out with complete gibberish. But, it sort of makes sense at the time. I'm going to do a little bit of, as you can probably hear, fiddling with my palette knives, and just do a little bit of white in the sky. I might zoom back. What you're seeing actually is, as usual, the zoom interpretation of my painting. Now, the mountains and the sky, if you're seeing exactly what I'm seeing on my screen, it's quite dull looking. It's incredibly fiery. I'm being totally honest with you there. And I will, as usual, photograph this when I finish painting and put it on Facebook. And I'll get it on there as quickly as I can once we've finished. And you'll see exactly what it really looks like. Okay, so you can see up to that. Okay. Right, so back to the palette knife. Again, same sort of thing. You know, paint as if nobody's looking. Chances are they're not anyway. Well, they won't be in here anyway because I'm always on my own. Just sort of have fun. Okay. Right, let's just intensify something down there. Let's just have a little bit of light there. Now, because I've already painted this edge here, you may think, oh, well, that's going to be tricky because you've got to paint right up to the edge of that cliff. It doesn't matter. You can go up to the edge and you can sort of stop if you want, or you can paint it into the cliff. Just go in, an eighth of an inch into the edge of the cliff, so that they sort of join together, and you'll find that you'll get quite interesting stuff going on. Okay. Just spotted something I want to get rid of. You probably can't see it, but right there is a bristle. Okay, so now having done that, the palette knife looks this color, basically the same color as the cliff. And I don't want that. So when you're doing things like this, keep your palette knife clean so that you pick up clean paint each time. And a lot of people don't realize that you can use a palette knife like this. People tend to think that you just use it to apply color and that's it. But that's totally wrong. You can, as I'm doing here, you can push it around, get all kinds of interesting effects. Just be adventurous. Let's have something there. A little bit of white up there, I think. Now, I don't know whether you can see, I think you might be able to see. There's all kinds of swirly shapes showing through. That's me when I gessoed the board. I don't sort of gesso that way and then gesso this way. I go all over the place with it because I actually like the different textures that you get showing through. You have to remember with painting, particularly, you know, this sort of loose, sort of semi-tonalist style, it's about paint and color and texture. Depending on how you want to paint, I suppose, but some people think, how do I put this? That they want to learn to paint so that when people look at their painting, it will look exactly like everything that you see around you in nature. And it's quite rare to find artists that can do that. It takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice. I mean, it takes a lot of skill and practice to paint like this too. I mean, you know, but to get absolutely fine, perfect detail in a painting, it's intense. Usually people who do that go through quite a long period of sitting in a very lonely attic somewhere, hardly moving, apart from their fingers just tickling around, painting every leaf. So if you want to end up doing that, it's good to start like this. Learn to relax first, and you will find that your skill will come later. I'm just going to, I think I'm just, before I stop, I think I might just increase the height of that there, and maybe make it just a little bit more foreboding. Also, I want to get more of a feeling of height, obviously. That's coming along quite well. This is actually now the part of the painting that I like, because it's things are starting to come together. In fact, I'm wondering whether to photograph this while before we start doing the Q&A, so that you can have a high resolution image, because it really is, you know, I've got my computer screen over there, and it all looks totally washed out and quite weak looking, but it's not like that. If you've been to these lessons before, you'll know what I mean, because you know, you'd see my painting later on Facebook, and it won't look anything like what you were looking at on Zoom. Okay, so I'm just going to simplify all this a little bit here. A few streaks. Interesting. Right, now, before I stop, I'm going to get a big brush. Will this one work? Oop. Right, so I'm going to get a brush, not necessarily a big one. And I'm just going to flatten the sky a little bit. You may not see much happening. So all I'm doing, very lightly skimming, like so. And that's enough. Once it starts to vaguely pick up a bit of paint, I just give it a wipe with a bit of paper. Obviously, when you're doing something like this, for instance, I've got these rocks. Now, it would be silly of me to swipe right down there across the rocks. So then that's the time when you turn the brush, so that the bristles are
to the top of the rock and you work away from it. If you indeed need to do it at all, which I think I do in this case, so I will. And yeah, I think that might be it. Now I'm gonna stop, and you can talk to me while I take a very quick photograph. And I'll try and process the picture. I've got to get it into Photoshop to yeah, check it. Anyway, so there we are. I think that's about an hour almost. That's me. Right, so feel free. I'm going to stop the recording. So feel free to unmute and ask questions. And I'll try and get the photograph done while you're doing that. So